info. She is talking about ghosts hanging around what some say is a real-life haunted house in Metro Detroit.
Haunted houses pop up all over the place this time of year.
A new Wall Street Journal report profiles the many parents who think they can see ghosts, specters, and mysterious movements on their advanced baby monitors.
Baby crib.
I freaked out. I stopped what I was doing and I ran upstairs and I grabbed my daughter.
Heather says this so-called ghost scratched her daughter Lily and attacked her too.
You are tuned in to the Ghost Signal. Hello and good morning or evening, wherever you are across the 24 time zones, and welcome to the Ghost Signal. My name is Jeff, and I will be your control operator for this episode of the Ghost Signal. This is episode 10, Sarah's Maze, in which we will visit the Winchester Mystery House of San Jose, California, and examine the story of how the most unique mansion in the United States came to be. We will also take a look at a story about an overnight stay at Grandma's house that didn't quite go as planned. A few announcements before we begin. If you have a true ghost story for the Graveyard Shift segment, or a twisted tale of terror for the Light in the Attic Patreon segment, please send it to the ghostsignalpodcast@gmail.com or visit the ghostsignalpodcast.com and submit them there. If I read it on the show and you include a mailing address with your submission, I will send you a Ghost Signal sticker, a 3 a.m. sticker, a severed head. Not that. Definitely not that. Definitely. The Ghost Signal Patreon is live if you so wish to contribute to the show in that way. There is a $1 tier called the Spirit tier where you can listen to episodes ad-free on the same day as the regular episode releases. And there is a $5 tier called the Spectre tier, in which you also gain access to ad-free versions of the episodes, but also a Light in the Attic, where I narrate creepypastas from all across the internet, in a short video where you can take a peek behind the curtain of the Ghost Signal. Are you a spirit or a specter? Go to www.patreon.com/the Ghost Signal podcast and choose the tier that's right for you. There is also a Discord server for the Ghost Signal. Discord is free to join, so feel free to jump in anytime to say hi and interact with other listeners who share a taste for the paranormal. Go to theghostsignalpodcast.com and scroll down until you see the link. Click on the link, then click on the Join Server button, then click on the Join Now button, and you're in. Soon there will be community gaming, where you can join me and others for a rousing game of the Dark Occult, or other such titles. So, download the Discord app, create your free account, and come hang out with us on the Ghost Signal podcast server today. In 1886, Sarah Winchester purchased a small farmhouse with 45 acres of property in rural San Jose and began expanding on it immediately, building rooms for two of her sisters, planning on them to move in with her. But plans fell apart. Even though they opted for somewhere else, her passion for construction flourished, and she kept adding to her farmhouse for almost 40 years, but some say she was guided by voices from the other side. This is the story of Sarah Winchester and her mystery house. Prepare for dead air.
Dead air.
Sarah Lockwood Party was born in New Haven, Connecticut in either 1839 or 1840. Nobody's quite sure of the exact date, as no birth certificate for her has ever been located. Sarah's father was Leonard Pertiet and was an accomplished woodworker. He had a mill and wood shop right next to the family house, and Sarah loved to watch the woodworkers practicing their craft. It gave her a love of woodworking that lasted the rest of her life. Sarah was an exceptionally bright child. Growing up in upper-middle-class New Haven, she was afforded many opportunities for an education many would dream of. She had private tutors that taught her several different languages. She became skilled at playing the piano, organ, and violin, and had a deep love of the works of Shakespeare. Just down the street from her was the home of the Winchester family, the founders of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Their only son, William, was infatuated with Sarah and grew up childhood sweethearts, and in 1862 they were married. On June 15, 1866, their only child, Annie Pertiet, was born. The joy was short-lived, however, as little Annie was diagnosed with marasmus, a condition in which the body does not absorb nutrients from the food it is given, and she slowly starved to death on July 25, 1866. This devastated Sarah, but as time went on the grief subsided as it does, and she eventually began learning money management from William's father, Oliver Winchester. They eventually hired an architect named Henry Austin to design a house large enough to house both sides of the family, and it was magnificent. Sarah was dazzled by the 20,000 square foot mansion and its marble floors and intricate woodwork. Her own love of architecture and design was taken to new heights from her involvement in its construction. In 1880, Oliver Winchester passed away, leaving William the president of his firearms company. William himself had a unique form of tuberculosis in which he would find himself debilitatingly sick through the winter months, but would recover as soon as spring came. But on March 7, 1881, the responsibilities of heading one of the wealthiest companies in the world, combined with his illness, proved too much for him, and he passed away as a result. Sarah found herself a childless widow, and extremely wealthy. The grief she suffered was excruciatingly deep, and she carried the scars with her for the rest of her life. Here's where the story diverges a bit. Some accounts say that her family physician suggested that she move out west, as the California climate would be good for her ever-worsening rheumatoid arthritis. Others suggest she held a seance to reach her beloved William. The medium apparently told her that she was cursed, and if she were to find any peace in her life, she would need to appease the spirits of those killed by Winchester weapons by building a house and never stopping. Whatever the case may be, at the age of 44, Sarah Winchester moved from New Haven to San Jose. As soon as she arrived, she began construction of her mansion. Originally, she wanted to have two of her sisters, Isabel and Estelle, move in with her, but they instead decided to move further north, closer to the population centers. With nobody but her servants to keep her company and distract her from her grief, she poured all of her attention into building her mansion. Whether it was a simple hobby, or if the spirits were driving her ever forward is up for debate. Having no overall master plan and no actual formal architectural training, some of her ideas confounded and frustrated the tradesmen working on her house. But she was paying them well, so even though some of her ideas came to nothing and were abandoned, they remained at the house as happy workers. E.F. Walters, a plumber working on the house, said that it was merely her hobby, and that she purchased and studied books on architecture and developed many innovative ideas in construction and design. Others said that she was terrorized by the ever-growing number of people killed by Winchester rifles and that construction could never stop, even at night. The builders had to keep working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to quell the spirits threatening her. Her house has been described as eclectic, bizarre, as the ultimate rambler, and as a Victorian monstrosity. By 1906, the mansion stood at over 70 feet tall and contained over 160 rooms. One of these rooms, buried deep within the mansion, was known as the Blue Room, and was Sarah's sanctuary from the spirits. She was the only person allowed to ever enter the room, and the path to reach it was labyrinthine. She even had an iron bar installed in the doorway, 4 feet off the floor, as a trap for any bad spirits that attempted to follow her in. Every night she held her own seances in the Blue Room, trying desperately to contact her beloved William and to get further designs and ideas from the good spirits who she believed were guiding her hand. And after she was done, she would sleep in a random room of the house. The tolling of the bell tower signaled to the workmen that new designs were ready for them. Then, in 1906, the Great Earthquake hit. The house was nearly leveled. The top 3 stories had been completely obliterated, but most of the first floor, amazingly, was unharmed. This earthquake had little effect on Sarah's resolve, however, and after the debris was cleared and the damage assessed, construction began again with renewed ambition. Having vast wealth meant that she could afford to utilize the most expensive and extravagant building materials available. She had priceless Tiffany windows made to order in Austria, designed to reflect the incoming light in dazzling patterns, then built rooms and walls around them so they never received any sunlight at all. At this point in the house's construction, there were nearly 2,000 doors, inlaid with German bronze and silver. The construction of the mansion went on like this for a grand total of 38 years. It has 40 bedrooms, 5 kitchens, 40 staircases with a total of 376 steps, some of which go absolutely nowhere, 52 skylights, 47 fireplaces, 2 ballrooms, and approximately 10,000 windows. Bathtubs were hand-painted and imported from Venice. Exquisite staircases and fireplaces were hand-carved from flawless mahogany, and the wallpaper was imported from France. The mansion has 3 elevators, one powered by electricity and the other 2 by water pressure. One of them only rises a few feet, and it's assumed that it was set up this way because in her later years, her arthritis had made her a near invalid, and she needed all the help she could get. Although her spending habits are the stuff of legend, dear listener, the primary purpose, according to her, was to thwart the bad spirits that would follow her for the rest of her life. Many visitors have stated that the house feels like it was built by ghosts, for ghosts, and has many more anomalies. The switchback staircase has 7 turns and 47 steps that are only a few inches tall, giving the staircase a height of only 9 feet. This may go back to Sarah's arthritis, or it may have been designed like this to confound spirits. Nobody knows for sure. Many doors are only 4 feet high and several open into solid walls, while others swing open to drops of 2 or 3 stories. One room has a cupboard 1 inch deep, but a pantry door a few feet away swings open to reveal a passage to the mansion's 30 back rooms. There is also speculation that there is a hidden room that has not been found. Legend has it that one evening, as Sarah and her secretary, who incidentally was the only person ever allowed to see her without her veil over her face, were having dinner, Sarah excused herself to retrieve one of her fine wines from her wine cellar. Only she knew where this wine cellar was and had the only key. However, when she entered the room, she found a black handprint on the wall. She was of the mind that it was made by a demon's hand and had the room sealed off. It has yet to be found. Sarah was devoted to the number 13. She believed this number had a powerful effect in protecting her from the bad spirits. There are 13 bathrooms, but only one has a shower head installed, which, by the way, is installed at just the right height for someone who was 5 feet tall or less. There are 13 windows and doors that open in the old sewing room, 13 glass cupolas in the greenhouse, 13 ceiling panels in the entranceway and guest reception room, 13 stones in the oriental bedroom windows, 13 panels in the wall by the 13th bathroom, 13 windows in the 13th bathroom, and 13 palm trees lining the main driveway. Many more instances of 13 occur throughout the house. When one of the ballroom chandeliers arrived with only 12 gas jets, she had one more added. It is well documented that Sarah Winchester was a notorious recluse and hated to be photographed. She grew the hedges around her house so tall that only the top floor was visible from the street. She was never seen without her black veil, except by her aforementioned secretary. Once, when 2 workmen caught a glimpse of her without it purely by accident, she summarily dismissed them both, but with several months' severance pay. She even turned down a request to visit her house by the sitting President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt. Then on September 5th, 1922, Sarah Winchester passed away at the age of 83, alone in her bedroom. At the exact moment of her death, all construction immediately stopped. The tradesmen simply put their tools down where they stood and went home. Her will was written in 13 sections and was signed by 13 people. At the time of her death, she only had $4 million of her once incredible wealth left, with that money going to the sanatorium she had built in Connecticut. the William Wirt Winchester Annex for Tuberculosis in New Haven. Sarah's niece was given control of the house with the hope that she would preserve it, but instead she sold off almost everything that wasn't nailed down, and a few things that were. In 1973, a private organization bought the mansion with the intent of restoring it back to its former enigmatic splendor. But the question remains, is the house actually haunted? The business model of the current owners seemed to rely heavily on the notion that it is. On April Fool's Day 1928, Sunday American Weekly published an article titled, Mrs. Winchester's Extraordinary Spook Palace. Whether or not the story had any basis in reality is unknown, dear listener, as the anonymous writer limited themselves to a simple description of the house and had gotten many of the details of the house wrong. The first recorded strange event that took place in the house was the case of Mrs. Arlene Biscoe's sudden onset of hysterical blindness in 1955 that quickly evaporated upon exiting. A subsequent visit in 1978 passed uneventfully. Psychics and investigators have been visiting the mansion for decades, and the only spirit they seem to encounter is that of Sarah Winchester herself. Disembodied footsteps can be followed, ending abruptly at the threshold of Sarah's bedroom. A disembodied voice has been known to whisper visitors' names directly into their ears. A former office manager at the mansion once saw a small gray-haired old lady sitting at one of the kitchen tables one morning before the first tour was to start. She thought that one of the employees had dressed up as Sarah Winchester to amuse tour-goers, but found out later that no such promotion existed. Also interesting to note is that on Halloween night, 1975, a former director of operations and a psychic, Warren Kapling, and two other people spent the night in Sarah's bedroom. Shortly after 6 p.m., as the quartet sat in the room with the lights off, Kapling stated that he heard an organ playing and a dog barking incessantly, but nobody else could hear it. Later in the evening, a beam of light with a blurred center was observed by all four men moving across the room, hovered by Sarah's deathbed for a few moments, then vanished. The truth behind Sarah Winchester's mansion is far more bizarre than anything created by skilled publicists to lure tourists in search of supernatural thrills. A woman who kept dozens of tradesmen building additions onto an 8-room farmhouse for 38 years non-stop so that the spirits would not haunt her, and vehemently disallowed herself any real contact with humans, doesn't need any manufactured fame, dear listeners. There's enough on record to puzzle even the most discerning skeptic. Yet in this house, built by ghosts for ghosts, is it any wonder that the phantom architects and the woman who carried out their plans remain behind in their masterpiece? Visiting this house is definitely one of my bucket list items, dear listeners. It is a true testament to how the human mind can create something so weird but captivatingly beautiful at the same time, and is a true architectural marvel. But now, dear listeners, the clock strikes 12 midnight. Time to clock in for the graveyard shift. This story comes to us from Redditor Magazine X Retro and is about visiting Grandma's house when she lives in one of the most haunted towns in Europe. It's entitled My Nan's Haunted Room. I was born and grew up in a town called Shrewsbury in Shropshire, England. The town has a reputation of being one of the most haunted places in the world. The town is well over 1,000 years old. A lot of the ruins of old buildings remain, even in the town center. Everyone I knew growing up had some sort of experience, haunted or otherwise, at some point in their lives. So, getting to my most haunted experience that spanned several years, these aren't my only experiences, but this is the one that has affected me the most. My grandparents have a house that all of the family, my mother and her siblings, grew up in. This house has a back bedroom that gives off a vibe that you just don't want to mess with. It's the only room in the house that has the door always closed and is now used as a storeroom that my nan refuses to enter alone. It was used when I was a kid as a spare bedroom for me and my brother when we would stay over, but we hated being in that room. One night me and my brother were asleep in there and I woke up just in time to look over and see the light fixture on the ceiling next to my face. I can even remember the feeling of the cold plaster touching my cheek right before whatever was lifting me up let me go. I hit the mattress and immediately started screaming, and my dad burst into the room to find out what had happened. I told him everything, but he was obviously skeptical, and I remember him saying that the room was very cold even though the heating was on, and there was an odd feeling he couldn't explain. My brother, who was asleep during my incident, said he had a dream that night of an old man standing over him, shouting for him to get out. And to this day he is reluctant to talk about it because of how real it felt. Now, this is where it starts to get worse. I was told this was over a month after the first incident, but I was in my own house on the other side of town, and it happened again. Me and my brother at this time used bunk beds, and I slept on the top bunk. My dad was downstairs watching TV, and suddenly he said he got a feeling something was wrong, then realized the feeling he felt was the same as it was when I had the incident at my nan's. He ran upstairs and burst into the room just in time to catch me falling from the ceiling. I had been picked up and lifted over the bed's safety rail and was hanging with my head tilted towards the ground. My dad burst in to see me hanging there in midair for a split second before dropping, and he caught me even though he was terrified and could never explain what happened. Nothing ever happened again until I was in my mid-20s. My nan was heading out somewhere for an overnight stay, so I said I would stay the night, feed the dogs, and sleep on the sofa. I did everything I said I would do, went to sleep on the sofa. I woke up in the morning at the back of the spare bedroom, behind a load of storage boxes. It took me 5 minutes of moving boxes out of my way to reach the door to get out, and to this day, 14 years later, I've no idea how the hell I got in that room, over those boxes, into the back section of the room without damaging anything. I've never been more frightened after waking up in all of my life, and I've never stayed another night in that house. My nan refuses to talk about that room. My granddad was the same prior to his death. I've no idea what happened in that house, what spirit or worse is living in that back room, but I'll never go back in that room for as long as I live. What do you think, dear listeners, spirits inspectors? How many Scooby snacks would it take for you to spend the night in that room? I myself would love to cross the pond and rise to the occasion. And with that, episode 10 is complete. If you've made it this far, you have my heartfelt gratitude. I cannot thank you enough for choosing to listen to the Ghost Signal when there's so many others out there. Would you like to share your story? If you would, please visit theghostsignalpodcast.com and follow the link to email me, and I will put it in a future episode. If you would like to be one of us, visit www.patreon.com/theghostsignalpodcast to gain access to exclusive content. Join the Ghost Signal Discord server and hang out with other listeners from all across the globe. The Ghost Signal is executively produced by Jason Wilson. Custom sound beds by J.M. Scherf. Video editing wizardry by Hale. Creative direction by Cassie. And Patreon mastery by Brooks Bigley. And my name is Jeff, your friendly control operator and your ghost host with the most. The next time the Ghost Signal haunts your eardrums, we will take a look at the story of a man known only as Riley and his experiences as a property guard on Utah's famous Skinwalker Ranch. So until then, dear listeners, spirits inspectors, ending transmission. Reach me at theghostsignalpodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Grey Rooms production. Copyright 2021 and 2022.
The ghost signal is lost. Transmission terminated.